Is it on air? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the IS meeting. I'm Councillor Little, the chairman of this committee. I would like to acknowledge that this land we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationships with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important for the living Kaurna people today. Any other Aboriginal people present, I thank you for your country. The roll call, everybody's here. No apologies. Motions to grant leave of absence. None. No leave of absence. No non-attendance. We have a deputation from Mr. David Shamel, with consulting with him and the officers. We're going to move this deputation when we speak to 7.1. Okay. Any declarations of interest? Confirmation of minutes. Somebody like to move those minutes. Moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Business arising from minutes. Councillors and Mayor who've had time to read the business arising. Is there any discussion on any one of those points? If not, could I have somebody move that we note those business responses, please? Councillor Valwonga, seconder. Councillor Goldstone. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. I will now get on to 7.1. Mr. Shamel, would you like to approach the podium, please? The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, thank you. Your Worship, Mayor Redman, the Chair, Councillor Little, councillors, Mr. Henry Innett, Sam Delena, staff, all the council, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here because of a problem that was arisen at a property that I own on Ailing Street that goes through from Ailing Street through to Holmes Street. I bought the property 2020, and in September of that year, we demolished the house. The house was in very poor condition, as were the outbuildings, tanks, fences. We demolished the buildings, and while the semi-trailers were there taking away the rubbish and the salvage, I spoke to the demolition contractor and asked him to remove the fence that faced Holmes Street. It was a second-hand iron fence, several colours. Certainly did nothing to enhance the look of Holmes Street. And parked, sorry, not parked, but yeah, parked right alongside of the fence were 6 almond trees. Now, these almond trees, I believe, were pretty straggly. Certainly, again, did nothing for Holmes Street. I believe rarely watered, if ever. And they were up against the fence. They were never anywhere near where a street tree would be planted. Anyhow, while the contractor was there, I said, "Oh, would you remove those trees and take them away, clean the site, ready for the subdivision to go ahead?" But in doing that, I recognise that I made a mistake, and I apologise for that. And I should have sought council permission to remove the trees. But because they were in such a position, they were up against a fence, nowhere near the footpath, nowhere near where a street tree would be planted. And I'm sure if you drive around Gawler, you'll find plenty of residents that have shrubs and bushes, etc., on council land, up against their fences, etc. And at the time, I thought nothing of removing, what I thought was an eyesore. But as I said, I was proven to be wrong, and the Gawler council approached me the next day and said that I'd made a mistake in removing the trees, and it would cost me $500 per tree, and I had to replace 2 trees for every one that had been taken out. So 12 trees were going to cost me $6,000. Yes, I made a mistake, but I think $6,000 is a little over the top for 6 almond trees that are planted nowhere near a street tree, and I don't believe that any councils have almond trees as street trees. So I've made an offer to the council that I would buy 4 new street trees at a rate of $500 per tree, which includes the buying of the tree and planting and watering for a period of 24 months. And so here I am tonight to put my offer to you, the councillors, and hope that there is some understanding that I didn't knock down any street trees. I didn't knock down any trees of any significance. I didn't knock down any trees that beautified Holmes Street in any way. I did what, had I done it the right way, the council would have had to remove at their cost. But instead, I removed the trees, and now it's hopefully going to cost me $2,000. So I can only appeal to you people what I believe is common sense, but I think that's about all I can say about the almond trees.
Is there any questions of Mr. Chairman? Councillor Tooley.
Thank you. Just a question, that point you made towards the end, that if you hadn't removed them, council would have had to. I'm interested in that statement. What are you basing that on, or do I need to ask an executive officer if that's...
No, councillor, I hope I can answer that for you. I had put an application in to council to cut the block into 5 residential blocks. And if I'm sure that in the interest of Gawler Council, that they would have approved the residential blocks, and people couldn't have entered their blocks with these trees parked in front of them. So I'm sure I would have received permission to do a 5 allotment subdivision, and as I said, no one could get in to their block while these trees were there. So the trees would have had to be removed as I'll apply to the council for a driveway, and hopefully they'll give me a driveway and all that. So yes, I think the trees had to be removed for the land division to go ahead.
Councillor Tosh.
Yeah, look, thanks. Just on that, what approvals have you received so far, development approvals for that site?
No, I haven't sought anything for building approval, you said, councillor?
Or development approval?
Yeah, well, it's currently with the council now. We initially made a plan for 6 blocks, but we then revised it because we thought the blocks were too tight on Holmes Street, and it would be better to only make 2 allotments onto Holmes Street. You know, I think we did that because hoping that would help sell the blocks, and it would be a better thing for Holmes Street. As it is now, where this land is, I don't have any street trees. And when I spoke with council previously, I said maybe 2 of the 4 trees be planted in front of my blocks of, or hopefully my blocks of land, to beautify them.
Is there any other questions, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry?
No, it's all right. Just asking you, but any other councillor or any other questions? Councillor Shanks.
This one's actually probably for Sam and Ryan. Are you able just to outline the process around a subdivision if the trees were still existent and how that would work? And if the onus would fall onto us or the developer to remove those trees for access of the development for the developer?
Sorry, councillor, I couldn't hear that.
No, that's all right.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I think Mr. Vine is going to answer that question.
Yeah, through the chair. When a land division application is lodged and we receive planning showing the intent of the proposed development, the assessing officer does a review of the application, and as a part of that preliminary assessment, it determines whether there is any council infrastructure or that may need to be relocated or removed to facilitate driveway accesses or any other component of the development. And that's when we identify that as part of further information and bring that to the attention of the developer, that there is a piece of council infrastructure that would otherwise need to be removed or moved. And then we outline the process for undertaking that, which is a section 221 application form for works on public road reserves. And then there's a process that guides that decision. And then ultimately, depending on the nature of what infrastructure needs to be removed or moved, it's a decision that's made by council, which is a separate process to the development assessment process. Once we've got an appreciation of if that isn't acceptable to be moved, or there is an arrangement in place that's been worked through, well, then the development application then can process and be assessed on its merits and in accordance with that. But as you can appreciate, there are, in an urban environment, often number of infrastructure impediments in the roads, stubby poles, street trees, Telstra pits, NBN, a whole raft of things that need to be considered when approving a driveway crossover for a new site.
Is there any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Shanks.
Just a follow-up question then. Are these 6 trees considered our property and street trees? If so, are they planted in accordance on how we would do it now?
Mr. Delaney.
Yeah, through the chair. These trees are certainly recognised as council street trees. We've recently picked them up in a tree audit because they're sitting on the verge. They're outside the property boundary. Are they trees that we'd plant now? No. They don't sit on our tree register, almonds. They're probably a remnant tree from maybe an original subdivision per se. But they are effectively council trees that we have responsibility for. And that responsibility would be effectively, as it stands, a 3-yearly prune that will, inspection and potentially a prune based on our current service levels. There wouldn't be any watering of the trees because of the age that they're out there, well established per se.
And would we plant them that closely?
Generally, listen, offhand, I can't recall the spacing. I've seen it on the visual. Generally, 1 every 15 metres would be about the spacing. In terms of this subdivision, if this application had come through, I suppose what would be the appropriate mechanism in terms of a application being lodged, so the land division being paused, the approval for the infrastructure, review on the footpath, i.e. in this instance, tree removal to be assessed. There's no reason why we wouldn't have withheld approval, and the policy gives us the ability to look at that. And anyone, well, in this instance, we would look at this on merit and say, effectively, there may have been a few trees that had to be removed to facilitate the 2 driveway accesses per se, but that would have been occurred in accordance with the policy. There would have been a contribution would have been paid for those tree removals that were necessary, and there would have been, the 2-for-1 arrangement as per the council policy that would have occurred, and there would have been payment made. Once that payment occurred, it then goes back to planning and it becomes assessed on the basis that effectively the trees weren't there.
Councillor Tully. 2 questions. Yeah.
Through you, Chair. What I understand then is these almond trees, remnant trees, resulted because of the subdivision to be very close to the boundary, not where we would plan to plant a tree. I noticed that when we're putting street trees, they are closer to the curb. Then you come back, then you have a footpath in the person's property, typically. I noticed in the diagram I'm looking at, there's no footpath. If we were to have provided a footpath on that verge, is it not likely we would have had to have removed those trees?
Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Chair. I'm just going through a Google image that I've got in front of me, and bear in mind it probably does. There certainly would have been a capacity for footpath to be placed behind the curb line, but there would have been some pruning required of the trees to actually do that. Generally, when we place new footpaths, we don't go about removing trees to facilitate the footpath. We look to retrofit a footpath in a location that's best, that best works for the location of existing trees. Sometimes that footpath is by the curb, sometimes it's behind the trees. It just depends on the individual nature. And particularly where these older areas where there isn't already a footpath, you find there's an unusual pattern of planting potentially based on remnant conditions or self-seeded plants. So,
Yeah, subsequent question.
Yeah. We know that as a council, we couldn't afford either the cost or the maintenance if we were to maintain all of the verge plantings, the council land, to a high standard. And I believe we encourage residents to plant, to look after their verge. Some people put lawn on their verge and they mow it. Other people put plantings on there. If a resident puts some plants on their verge, and I've known of people who grow vegetables, that's encouraged in some areas, do those plants, even if they're trees or shrubs, the moment a resident takes pride in their curb and does plantings, do they then become the property of council? Therefore, the subsequent question is, if the person wants to improve that landscape, remove a couple, put a few back in, do they have the problem of red tape? Or is the resident allowed to do that, to make their verge attractive? And as I drive around Gawler, I see people who really take a lot of pride in their houses with their verges. Are they in breach if they were to dare to touch that? Do they need to get permission to put them in first? And then do they need to get permission to prune them or to remove them? What's that rule?
Mr. Delina, can you answer that, please?
Certainly, through you, Chair. The council certainly encourages and supports people planting out the verges. We have the policy that allows that to occur, and we have the Section 221 process under the Local Government Act, which allows for residents, or in this instance, amongst other things, residents to improve the verge and for council to grant them an authorisation to do that. So in that authorisation, it spells out what do we see as an acceptable level of verge planting. We have fact sheets that have been developed to provide guidance on this. But effectively, plantings less than 0.5 metre high to maintain sight lines, and that effectively residents can maintain. And there's a number of, I suppose, there's some items that we won't allow, cactus and I think other bits and pieces, but effectively, provides guidance as to what can occur. There's no instance where we allow a street tree to be managed by a private property owner. So they can manage their low vegetation, and there's a Section 221 that provides them an authorisation to do that, and it provides a protection to the council from a liability perspective that we've issued that authorisation. So it does protect the council as well, and sets out the obligations on the landowner to maintain that area. But in no instance does any council allow a street tree to become managed by a private property owner. Correct.
I think, Deputy Mayor Sample.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably back to Sam. What I'm trying to get my head around, already 6 feral almond trees are blocking the front of this maybe development. Why has council asked Mr. Shamble to plant 12? It's going to be a fortress. So I don't understand that, but how did it come that 6 are now blocking it off, and the council director here, Paul, is saying we need 12. I mean, what are you going to do? Peek through between the bushes? I mean, why 12?
Doesn't say 12. 2 for 1, it says.
Yeah.
It says 2 for 1, Deputy Mayor. It says so. It's, yeah.
So,
okay.
our policy is pretty clear, and the intent is trying to promote that if you're going to remove a street tree that has an existing amenity, we're going to put the 2 for 1, and the council supported that, and obviously supports climate change action, and it doesn't. There's a cost associated with that undertaking. The intent is not to place the 12 trees in front of this existing allotment, but to spread those 12 trees along the length of Home Street. And if you and Home Street in particular, it doesn't have a lot of street trees, but if there were other street trees in that area, we would look to plant those replacement trees as close as possible to the existing site where there were vacant wells.
Councillor Davies, have you got a question for Mr. Shamble, or can I let him sit down?
Questions to start.
You can sit down, Mr. Shamble, if you like.
So in terms of these replacement trees, I know we had a Williston traffic management plan with roads and things. Is this one of the roads that would be affected by new footpaths and that sort of thing?
Mr. Delena.
You're stretching my knowledge there, Councillor David, through the chair. In terms of where this was identified as a road that actually had a dedicated footpath, the Mayor seems to recall that's the case. Regardless, there would be a footpath that would eventually be placed in Home Street, because as part of our just new footpath program and policy position, that we would put at least one footpath on a road. Whether it's this side of the road or the other side of the road, I couldn't tell you at this point. But there is a decision made at the time that we do scope this out. Where is the less impediment for a footpath location, considering trees, stow poles, widths of verges and that sort of thing?
Councillor Koch.
I've got a question for probably Sam, I suppose. In the letter that was sent on the 10th of the 8th, 20, it sort of was sent to the developer, and one of it looked at all the location of all the existing street infrastructure, including trees. Now, if the developer had responded back to that and said, this is what we're going to do and this is what I'd like to do, and the trees would have been identified, then council would have then said, okay, we're going to take out those trees, we need to replace 2 for 1. So that would have been the process. Is that right? Yeah, so that would have been, so the developer would have said, yes, I'll take the trees down, but I'll replace it 2 to 1, and there would have been a cost involved. That would have been the process, is that right?
Answer, Mr. Delina, please.
Correct.
So it's-
They would have gone through the normal process in
Yes.
terms of which tree, minimising the tree loss.
Yes.
So how many? What was which trees had to be removed to facilitate the access?
That's right,
Would
yeah.
have been all 6. I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, just looking chronologically, this letter was sent before the trees were removed. So the developer had the letter before the trees were removed. So you would think they would have understood that the tree, you needed to have nominated the trees and gone through this process. I would have thought, because they received the letter. Yep.
And Mayor?
A question for Mr. Schammel. Firstly, thank you for coming along this evening, Mr. Schammel. Just what's the width of the block that you're developing? The width, not the length, but the width.
I believe it's about 38 metres wide.
Okay, so if we plant street trees 15 metres apart, that's 2 trees, but it won't fit 12.
No, you wouldn't plant all the trees in the one spot, Mayor Redmond. You'd probably move them around and give other people a chance to do it. But could I just add something? Councillor Tooley put a good question to Sam Delina about if you were to put a footpath on Holmes Street, any progressive council wouldn't leave 6 almond trees already there so people poke their eyes out as they walk down the street, because that's exactly what would happen. Like, who would leave 6 almond trees up against the fence when you want to put a footpath there? I've been there many times to that particular allotment. You would have to remove those trees to put a footpath there.
Thank you.
But sorry, Councillor, sorry, Mayor Redmond. In answer to your question, I hope I answered it properly. Thank you.
Any more questions, Mr. Tremble? Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for coming out. It's good to see community members engaging with the elected body. So, it does make a difference hearing from the applicant and not only reading about them. So I do thank you for that.
Thank you.
I guess my question, I just wanted to hear your opinion. The report that we have in front of us sort of shows the risk around if we accept your offer, we're actually opening ourselves up for the prerequisite, saying that, because we put a lot of value in our street trees.
Of course you do.
That's right. So you've gone and moved 6 against our policies, which you've apologised for, and I thank you for that. What do you think accepting a lower offer sends as a message to future developments? Because obviously the subdivision that you're trying to do is an investment opportunity, which you're well within your rights to do. So I'm just asking your opinion before, because obviously we have staff's opinion in the report. So I'm just, interested to hear your thoughts on that very, very real risk, although I don't see the value in the almond trees, me personally, but I am keen to hear your opinion on that, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, thank you, Councillor. Firstly, Councillor, do you class almond trees as street trees? Sorry?
Personally, no, I don't.
No. Okay. If you have street trees, wouldn't you like them all in the one position? Say, for the sake of the exercise, 3 metres in from the boundary or 2 metres in from the gutter. You would want them, the street trees, to enhance the look of the street. You'd want them in a straight line down in one area. These trees were nowhere near this. These trees, there is some street trees planted in Holmes Street, and they're in a straight line. They're nowhere near where these so-called street trees or almond trees were. These almond trees were out of place. They were up against a fence, nowhere near any other street trees. And you know, anyone who bought a block of land there, they wouldn't want an almond tree on the front of their house, would they? They would, you know, do what I should have done and apply to council to remove it. And I would think that the council would grant that permission as well. But one of the things that I'm probably arguing about here, you know, are almond trees street trees? Are street trees allowed to be parked up, to be planted up against a fence? And I think the answer to both of those questions is no. You know, almond trees were never meant to be street trees, and street trees aren't meant to be planted up against someone's front fence.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I think I'll take one more question. I think we've thrown this around enough tonight. Councillor Cole.
It just, I mean, I suppose we just had an opinion. When Councillor Shank asked an opinion, I'll ask an opinion now. Mr. Schammel, if you had gone through the process to do the development, would you have requested to remove the 6 trees and then paid for those 6 trees to be removed as per the policy?
Well, that's what I should have done, and
That's
I didn't
right. So
do.
that's what you should have done.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and,
so
and that's why, councillor, that's why I've made an offer of $2,000, because I made a mistake.
But you would have paid the 6,000.
Well, you know,
Yeah. You went through the process. You would have paid the 6,000.
well, yeah. If
think-
I'd done something, $6,000 worth of damage, I would be probably prepared to pay $6,000.
No, not damage. I mean, if you would have gone through the process and applied, and you know, like the letter said, and you got development approval, part of it would have been to remove the 6 trees, I assume, and there would have been a 2-for-1. So you would have agreed to that, to pay that, to get the development approval.
Would have I paid that?
Did you get the development approval? Yes, get the development approval.
I think probably not. It probably would have gone to further up the tree. But anyhow, we'll have to work that out.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I think the Mayor wants to ask one more question. No, you don't? I'd like to thank you for your time, Mr. Schammel.
Thank
You'd like
you,
to take a
Councillor
seat?
Little.
I'll leave it in the hands of the elected members
Thank you.
to make a decision.
Thank you.
The Mayor, at the floor.
Yeah, I'd like to move point 5, that we support a formal counter offer of $2,000. Are you happy to I'm sorry, if I'm able to speak?
Yes, please.
So I've listened to the presentation by Mr. Schammel. I've listened to the questions. I'm keen to hear further debate. I guess I'm testing the waters. I think there needs to be some flexibility sometimes. These trees were not street trees. They were remnant from an old orchard. I've walked past those trees many, many times. They were remnant old trees, and I guess you could easily argue they were functioning as street trees, but they were not street trees. So I guess there's a challenge to that definition. I'm hearing what Councillor Tooley was saying around looking after verges. There is a very bureaucratic policy, and I believe you need public liability insurance. I think most residents don't have that when they put lawn on their verge, but I do accept that street trees that are planted as street trees need to be properly looked after. Many residents can do that, but it's also the remit of staff to do that. So I'd like to think there's some flexibility around a mistake that was made. Mr. Schammel has acknowledged his mistake. I think that is honourable for Mr. Schammel to come along and address council, acknowledging that mistake. I think there will be differing views around policies and adhering to policies, but I think as a caring council, we should have the capacity to have flexibility around that, depending on the circumstance. So I put that to people and hope they support it.
Your second is Councillor Balwonga. Do you wish to speak? Anybody else wish to speak against the motion or for the motion? Councillor Fraser.
I'll be voting against this. In my opinion, it doesn't really matter what the trees were. They're trees, they were there. And Mr. Schammel was sent a letter on the 10th of August, which actually stipulated that there was a separate section 221 for removal for him to remove any street trees. That was actually in the letter. Then on the 9th of September, he has the trees removed. Full marks to him, he's come along and apologised and said he's made a mistake. But the thing is, he has made a mistake, and there is a fee, and I'm sorry, but and if we keep just accepting the lower next somebody's doing a development, they'll just say, oh, we'll do that, and the council will, you know, just let us go. So I'm sorry, but I can't vote for this. Any other councillors? Councillor Goldstone? No. Why isn't it? Oh, Councillor Fraser, you turn yours off, please. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, ordinarily I would support the application of council's policy. It's pointless having a policy if you're not going to apply it. And if you don't like the outcome of the policy, you should amend the policy. That's the general view I've always had. But in this instance, I can see that there are some issues there that we should take into account. I would have thought a more acceptable compromise would have been to ask Mr. Schammel to pay for the replacement of at least the 6 trees that he's removed. Not on that site, but it may only be 1 or 2 trees on that site, but at least another 4 somewhere else. If my maths are right, that would amount to $3,176. So all he's doing then is reimbursing council for the cost of replacing the 6 trees that he's removed, rather than paying for 4 trees. So I'm sort of inclined not to support the motion, but I would support an amendment that allowed for him to pay for the cost of the trees he removed.
The mover's happy to change it to that price. Are you happy to accept that? Is the second happy with that? Okay, so the second is not happy with that. So, Councillor Koch.
I can't support this as it is. I would support it if it was 3,100, because it would be replacing the 6 trees that were removed. I'm concerned that it sends a message that this is the template you can use to bowl over trees in our town. You don't put an application in, you go ahead, you do something, oops, I knocked them over, they were pretty shabby, I'll just pay a minimal, and then I'll get away with it. I'll come to council, cap in hand, and I'll save myself a fair bit of money. That seems to be the template. Mr. Schammel was sent a letter, and it specifically said what trees were going to be removed. There was no development application put in, nothing. So that's not a very good thing. So we really have our policies, we have our procedures, and all developers should follow those. And they, on majority of cases, I suppose they do, and that's good. You can put. I've looked at the site and I've looked at where the trees are from Google, and yes, you will be able to put a, would have been able to put a path there. You could put it behind the curb because the trees are close to the fence, so the curb could have gone in. And as Mr. Delina said, you would prune the trees so that people didn't get knocked in the eye. So that's how we do it anyway. So I think, on balance, and also the fact that they are designated street trees, and it was in a report. The report said they were fair to, fair condition, and they had, up to 10 years life left in them. So, that they were still providing habitat, still providing benefit and amenity to our community. The report that we had didn't say they should be removed, and that they were condemned and should have been removed. So the trees still had that have that amenity, that life, up to 10 years. But on balance, you know, I'd be happy to support the replacement of the 3 only because Mr. Shamel has come here and accepted the fact that he's probably done something wrong, and that's important. And but as it stands, I won't be able to support it. And if it gets down, I'd be happy to move a motion that goes up to 3,100. Thank you.
Councillor Davies.
Well, I'll move an amendment then for that cost of 6 trees version of the motion, which I guess I noticed this, and also this version of the motion doesn't say anything about replanting trees. So do we need to add a point there about replanting 6 trees along? No, oh, that's just implied. Okay. So what was the exact amount? 3,176. So the second didn't approve. That's why I'm moving it as an amendment instead of as a.
3,176.
You can do that. That's what an amendment is. If it doesn't, yeah. If the variation doesn't work, it's an amendment. Yeah. It does need a seconder, but I can speak to it. Yes.
Just wait till.
Just getting the motion right.
Get the motion up there first, so members can see it. Yeah, that's what we. Yeah. No, if there's a second to that motion, the amendment, Councillor Hughes, you second that? I'll get back to you in a minute once we get it sorted. Yeah. Yeah, but that should be. No, but I just noticed it myself. The original motion should be moved by Mayor Redmond and seconded by Councillor Dallin. That's it. Thank you.
And that's not the formal counter offer, so it's not the formal counter offer, so you just have to change the line.
Payment order should be.
Just supports a payment.
Point 2 should be that supports a payment order of 3,176. It says not formal. It shouldn't be formal counter offer. And get rid of the rest. That's it. Straight. Happy with that mover and seconder? You can speak to it now, Councillor Davies.
All right, so yeah, this is fairly simple. I think I'm happy to support not paying an extra penalty fee of 6 trees under the understanding that, yes, this isn't the typical situation with street trees and, happy to look at these cases individually. But also, I think it makes sense that we replace the 6 trees with 6 trees. And so that's why I moved this amendment.
The seconder wish to speak to the motion? No. Any other further discussion? Councillor Tooley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, I'd like to speak against the amendment. I hope that means if the amendment fails, we go back to the Mayor's motion for 2,000, which I think was reasonable, and I think the points that the Mayor made were very sensible. I think the facts are that the trees that were there were a remnant from a previous planting. They were never planted as street trees. I think we accept that as a fact. They were in a very poor position, right up against the fence line as a remnant. If we did put a footpath in, we choose mainly not to put footpaths close to the curb because of the Australian standard and because of safety. There are occasions where we have to, where there is no other option, and you will see occasionally some footpaths reasonably close to the curb, not desirable. I doubt, given the width of that medium strip, I believe that we would not have put a pavement that close to the curb. I believe that we would have probably removed the trees. They were shabby, old, and of little value. That's my first point. The second point is, I'm aware that this council doesn't really come down with a heavy hand very often. We've had people in this town, I know of them, and I know of the circumstance of many where they have put up a fence without permission, where they've built a shed without permission, where they've built an extension to their house without full permission, or they varied it without permission. And I'm aware that members of this staff have gone to those people and said, now listen, you've made a mistake. Will you put in an application, let it go through the process, and then it gets legitimised. We do not make them rip down, rarely. It may happen in some cases, but in many of the cases that I'm talking about, those people were not forced to rip down their extension. They were not forced to rip down the shed. They were not forced to pull down that fence. There are some examples where that has happened, but there are many where we haven't come down with a heavy hand. We've actually done what good councils do. We've gone to those people, we've spoken to them, we've realised that they've made an honest mistake or an honest oversight, and we've offered them an olive branch to correct it. And they've followed the process and it's been approved, and then the structure can stand. I'm also aware that we have not issued them a penalty in that circumstance. It's what good councils do. I'm actually embarrassed that the first part of this motion here actually wanted to punish this person to that degree is an embarrassment. And we have heard a genuine apology. You know what, looking at it and listening, I didn't know the circumstance, that's the very thing I would have done. I would have looked at those almond trees so close to the boundary and so scraggly, and I would have said, as you're removing the fence, can you get rid of them? And I would have innocently not even thought they were the property of council. And then for this gentleman to then come when we reminded him, and he said, really? I honestly didn't get that. And then he offered to pay $2,000. It should never have come to us. I'm embarrassed that it's come to us as a council. Surely we are better than that. This is as obvious as you get. This is not the developer who's put 6 houses where he should have only put 4. This is not someone who's just completely thumbed themselves and gone and built an extension that they never should have done, or put a pool in without. It's not that. And we've done this so many times where residents have made a mistake and we haven't come down the heavy hammer. I would not have him pay anything, to tell you the truth, because I think eventually we would have put a footpath and we would have planted trees and maintained them. However, the 2,000 figure I think the Mayor was right to pick up on that one. The gentleman is prepared to offer that. Please vote down this amendment and let's get back to the 2,000, quickly endorse it and move on to the next item.
I think the CEO wants to make a statement.
Yes, through the chair, just to respond to some of the references made by Councillor Tooley. The administration don't apply a heavy hand. The administration seek to be practical and reasonable every turn. The administration do, when confronted with illegal development, do as a matter of practice, depending on the impacts of that illegal development, whether it's a carport, a garage or a house extension, do take the reasonable approach, which is, yes, to ask for the landowner or the developer to lodge an application so that the merits of that illegal development can be determined. Now, that is a accepted, encouraged practice by the courts. And if we were to spend money, legal fees, expiation processes, and find ourselves in the ERD court or in the magistrate's court, and we have not followed that step of offering for the lodgement of an application to consider the merits of the illegal development, then would be thrown out of court. So it's a well-accepted practice and we apply that accordingly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I just had a question. The motion we have up on the board right now is actually a new motion. There was no preparation for the applicant actually being able to read it, respond, make a presentation. Are we able to request his thoughts on what he sees on the screen at the moment, given the fact that it's his personal money and it's actually, it's not ours, and it might be as easy as, yes, $1,176 makes this go away, I'm more than happy, or I'm going to dig in. I think that would be very, very good to hear from the applicant if possible.
I can answer that. The process is the original thing was 6,300. This is an amendment to the 2,000. So I think the frame of money has been mentioned before. So I don't think we need to hear from the applicant again. The council has the right to move the amendment if they so wish, for that amount of money without consulting the first applicant. So anybody else wish to speak against the amended motion? You seconded the first one, yeah. You wish to speak against this amendment? Oh, okay, that's all right, Councillor. Okay, well, I'll put that amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? That's weird. The chair votes against that amendment. Okay, we're now carried the amendment's lost. Yes. Do we now have the motion? Yeah, the casting vote, yeah, sorry. Lost on the casting vote. Yeah, no, it's on there. Lost on there. Yep, that's fine. It's right, Anne. It's there. Okay, we now have the motion. Do you wish to close the debate, Mayor? Oh, you want to have a... Okay, sorry, Councillor Shanks. Yep.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate. I thank all members for putting in the 2 cents here. And Kelvin, I also commend your attempt there. I see where you're going. I think I had the chance to save face and still be able to send a message that we're going to replant the 6 trees and then we're back to start again. So I understand where you're coming from, and I would have loved to hear what the applicant's thoughts on that was, but because we couldn't hear that, I couldn't support it, unfortunately, because as I sort of stated, it's this man's personal money. So obviously he's admitted that there was a mistake made. I believe there's enough information around these almond trees. At a first look, I'm never for removing trees. I'm always for greening up the place as best as possible. But with the condition of what these trees were in, the pictures sort of, tell the story and the logic that needs to be provided was, yeah, bogged down by a process that was misunderstood or not known by the applicant. So I can sort of sympathise with that, being, yeah, from the building background and coming across some processes that don't make logical sense to me. So I understand that, and I do thank you for coming in once again. So I support the Mayor's comments around providing some flexibility and really showing that, you know, we are people, and although we have policies, we can listen to the case by case, and we can show that flexibility. And I think that the risk around the floodgates opening is a common theme argument we do see, and it is a sound argument. I give staff that, but there's also the counter argument of not showing compassion or flexibility. So I think in this case, the risk is weighed in not being seen to be compassionate and not showing that we can listen. So yeah, look, I'm happy to support the 2,000 contribution, and I thank once again the applicant for taking the time and coming to talk to us. It's made a massive difference.
Yeah, you after me once. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Yeah, I'll just make sure she's caught up a bit here. Well, thank you, Mr. Shamel. Yes. And yes, and $2,000, that's the motion. The original one the Mayor put up and seconded by Councillor Vallelonga. You know, we're trying to sort of wait there to catch up, yeah. Yes, so Mr. Shamel, what happens there is that you have to give us $2,000. You have to give us $2,000 only, okay? And thanks for your time again, gentlemen, and you're free to leave. Yep, all right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Shamel. Okay. You caught up now? Yeah. Yep. So we're now up to item 7.2. This is for noting. Moved by the Mayor, and he's seconded by Councillor Vallelonga. Any discussion? Councillor Tooley. Oh, sorry, the Mayor's going to speak to it first. Sorry. Oh.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'll just briefly. I think this is a reflection of the focus that we're putting on climate change and really driving innovation and change. I'd like to congratulate Tim Kelly on the work that he's doing and staff in general, and also the working group, because it is helping me when I go to different forums, and there is a real move to circumvent the real importance of climate change currently in some councils. So the more work we do and the more collaboration we do, the better.
Councillor, you want to speak to it, Councillor Vallelonga? Councillor Tooley, you had a question? Or are you speaking against the motion? Okay, oh, it's your turn.
Yeah, and I note in the recommendation that we're empowering Tim and Jack, who are going to be our delegates in that. And again, as the Mayor says, this is the time to drive hard, really hard at this. We have to nationally reach our targets, and it has to filter down. We have to reach our targets at a state level, at a local level. As it says in the report, the cost of renewable energy is coming down, as is storage. The future will be local networks, local storage, excess, not whacking people with fees for excess, but the excess will be used to do things like produce hydrogen. The hydrogen will be stored in ammonia. It's an massive export opportunity for the country. And we need to get in South Australia as early as we can in that. And our LGA, I think the interest in this has certainly grown. I'm hoping that we get across with the declaration of an emergency at the next AGM or OGM. But there is a real momentum for this. And this is part of this is where you get traction. You can talk about the emergency, but you've got to narrow it down to what you do. And so we need a procurement that is heavily divesting from fossil fuels. That business model is finished. It's only the old oligarchs that are hanging on, like the tobacco industry did, trying to get the last bit of profit out as they kill more people. It's an ancient fuel. It's got to stay in the ground. And so we need the LGA, with our support, to drive to get the most green, environmentally sound contract for us.
Thank
So
you.
let's go for it.
Any other questions? Councillor Crosh.
Yeah, I've got a question for Jack if he's around, or Tim. Or Tim, can I have a question for Tim?
Ask away.
Tim, I did, in the report, it talks about smart metering systems. Is that actually considering time of use tariffs, and and can we access time of use tariffs in South Australia?
The inclusion of this was a reflection of what's being done in other contracts. So the City of Adelaide were able to negotiate a special deal to have smart meters installed as part of their energy contract. My understanding is that smart meters will help you understand how much electricity you're producing, when you're producing it, how much you're consuming, and when you're consuming that electricity, and it'll also help you understand your net imports and exports. So it will support time of day pricing opportunities. It would also support curtailment opportunities. Some businesses actually can make money by switching off at certain times, or make money by consuming more at certain times. Now, as to the detail of what's on offer in South Australia and what would be on offer in the energy contract, I have no idea, but smart meters was one of those value-added aspects that we would be looking to explore. There are a number of other ones as well that we should look at, and the whole idea of this contract is to actually get the best product for the best price, and take the time to do that properly over the next couple of years before 2023 starts.
You've got a follow-up question?
Just another comment. From my understanding, the time of use tariff, you can actually almost get a negative. You can actually get a negative tariff in some situations. And when you consider that we would probably be consuming our energy in that shoulder period, you know, it'd be very good, I think, if we could actually be accessing those renewables in that shoulder period. Because I think a meters would probably go backwards. That's just a comment. But anyway, I'm supporting this. I think it's very important. We should be looking at getting the cheapest price for our renewables, and this is a good step forward. So I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tim. Just as a side, I spoke earlier today to a couple of the managers, and it gives us the opportunity in a couple of years' time to go possibly 100% renewables, which is a great outcome for the council. And if this council can be one of the leaders in that area, I'd be ecstatic, I think, as most people in this chamber would be. So I wish Tim well to do the best he can for us if he gets put on this committee. Thanks, Tim. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, look, I'll be supporting it, and just a congratulations to Tim and Jack, because I've heard you speak passionately about these items in the working group on climate emergency, and yes, you're definitely the right man for the job, the right guys for the job. So I look forward to yeah, moving forward and seeing what this brings to us in the future, and I'm confident in your knowledge. So thanks.
Justin's aside also, I'll adopt him again. He attended our last RAP meeting and was quite interested in discussing with the Aboriginal community their thoughts on climate change as well, and what they used to do in the old days and that. So Tim's right into it. So I think we have the right man for the job. Thank you. Any other questions or For or against? Shall I put the motion? You wish to? No? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much.
7.3. The Mayor's got a question.
Yeah, just in regards to play equipment, I couldn't really see on the detailed design package exactly what type of play equipment we're getting, and I couldn't quite see. We've got bench seats, we've got boulders, yeah, we've got a swing, but if some clarification around the type of play equipment that is proposed.
Which officer would be answering that? Mr. Delena, thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. Sorry, I'm just reading what's in the officer report in that regard. There is I'm not across the detail specifically, but within the officer report references a wheelchair carousel being provided, some artwork, some swings, a basket swing, a children's swing and a teenage swing. And there's a large turf area. I know there's some nature play being installed as well. And there is a selection of multifunctional play equipment that allows for climbing, sliding and elevated play, as would be a typical playground.
Does that answer your question, Mayor? Anybody wish to move the recommendation? Councillor Tooley, seconded the Mayor. You wish to speak, Councillor Tooley?
Thank you. Yeah, from what you get from the plans, it does look like quite an interesting design with a little bit more sort of nature play and adventure play and things. You know, that area, I know it quite well. Cycled past it every day for years. Quite a tired sort of setup at the moment, so definitely ready for renewal. So yeah, happy to support it. That whole area, there's a real asset for the town, yeah, I think there's potential for a lot more in the spaces around that area. Thank you.
You wish to speak, Mayor?
No, just to say I concur with everything Councillor Tooley has said.
Any other further discussion? Deputy Mayor Sample.
Thank you, Chairman Paul. Yes, as a resident of the area, I can't seem to get my head around, as well as residents in the area that have mentioned matters to me. Councillor Koch also lives in the area. The main part is that parklands. There's no parklands in Councillor Koch's area, so it's an area that can be utilised by, say, between Chick Avenue and, you know, what's the name? Yeah, and so forth. And yes, we're doing this for the playground, and you know, the Honourable Treasurer lives straight opposite. He doesn't play the playground; he's a bit too old for that now. But basically, this is being done for children mainly, and so forth. And it's interesting reading through the information that came back from the residents. But the residents around 500 metres of the park were sent a letter and asked for information. And then council organised a meeting there. But those further than the 500 metres, and I'm on Middle East Drive, I never got a letter. But, you know, not that I want my dog down there, he goes down by himself. But basically, that park is a very, very important.
Through the chair, please.
It's a very important area. But again, I'm about money. You know, when I look through here and I look back through previous where we asked for money for these parks and to do things and so forth, whether we could do better than just building a playground, because through the information that's been given to us here, the biggest problem is children, people can't run around on it with no shoes on because it's full of Boxhorn, full of three-corner jacks and all that. It seems to me there's irrigation has been asked for in all of that. Then everybody in the area maybe have picnic events here or whatever it may be. But we're not, what I'm saying is we're going to put a lift in at the Visitor Information Centre for $569,000. Why? And we're only going to spend $95,000 on this magnificent park in the area. It's on page 29. So I'm just thinking, you know, like when it comes to the point of when we get these grants, and congratulations to the staff that go to the trouble to get these government grants is terrific, but where we spend our money and where we direct it, I really think we've got to be a little bit more positive about inviting everybody to be part, because the people within 500 metres of that area is only a few houses. I mean, in the elite area up there where Councillor Koch lives, I mean, there's a lot more people up there that could come on down and use that park if the facilities were there. So I'm just wondering if we, you know, I mean, are we going to spend $569 on the lift for the Visitor Information Centre? You know, has it been approved? Are we going to spend it? Can't we put some of that money into other areas?
Councillor Koch, I believe you're next.
It's interesting. I actually live up there, but I'm of the view that this is over-egging it, actually. I think we're overdoing it. It's a lot of money, and I think we could spread that money around other playgrounds around the town. I don't think we need all of that. It's a neighbourhood playground. It's not a local or a regional playground. It's a neighbourhood playground. We've got Springwood 1.4 kilometres away, and we've got Clonlee, which is 3 kilometres away. It's not that far. You know, I think what we're doing here, we're actually putting in facilities more than you would have at a neighbourhood park. You know, you're actually putting up. So therefore, does that mean we lift all the parks, all the neighbourhood parks up in town to this level? I would hope not, because you know, so we've got the capital expense, we've got the ongoing maintenance. So it's a $12,000 extra maintenance. Then we've got the depreciation. You know, we're at a point where our debt is getting higher and higher, and we should be actually working to reduce our debt, like we did in 2015, to actually create the space to do borrowings to do the bigger projects, the Calvethans and the pool. It just seems like we're just spending more and more money, and we're not taking the issue around our big budget debt that we need to get down. So, you know, it's nice. But I just think we're over-egged it. We've just overdone it. And now the expectation is, after the community consultation, and we gave everybody that beautiful little sheet and they could circle everything, so people circle everything. And now there's this expectation that we're going to have this facility when most of us up there we all have big yards. You know, let's be real. We all have big yards. Most of us, bar me, have lawns. The kids can play in. You know, this is something. You know, you need this sort of stuff in areas where you haven't got big yards and lawns and everything else. But you know, we're pretty all right up there, really. That's my view. But I mean, I think if you could pare it down, it'd be a lot better. But you know, I think we're just overdoing it. So I won't support this because I think it's just overdone, unfortunately. Thank you.
Councillor Fraser, next.
Just a couple of things. Firstly, Councillor Sample, the lift at the visitor centre, we've got a grant especially for the lift. So no, we can't spend that money on anything else. It has to be spent on the lift. And also this is costing $310,000, not $95,000. But I have to disagree with Councillor Koch, because when you've got children or grandchildren, you find that you go to parks a lot. My grandchildren are growing up now, but when they were really little, we used to go around there to Hemmerford Grove a lot. They outgrew that, but by then Springwood had come up, so we used to walk up there, albeit that it was a nightmare walking on Carlton Road to get to it. That was an absolute nightmare. And they went there because they were older and there was other equipment. So Hemmerford Grove needs to have more of a variety so that the age groups are there. They love going to parks. And when you've got grandchildren, you'll find that you don't go to the same park all the time. They want to go to this one and that one and that one. So if they're all different, they've all got something different in them, they get their favourites for a while and then they want to go somewhere else. So I think this will be amazing. It's a big area. I know you've got the Oval, which we're not doing anything with, but like you, I agree we can't afford to do anything else. But I think it'll be an absolute asset to that area.
Thank you. Councillor Shanks.
Just a question first, and then I'd like to speak if I can. Probably through you, Chair, to Sam. I picked up a note where we've increased staff capabilities. Can I just confirm that that's because we have a landscape architect on staff in Jordan now? It is? Yeah, fantastic. I thought that was a pretty good point just to make. So I'll speak to it anyway, but yeah, we've managed to keep the design in-house, and I think I've commended staff before on the come and play, have you say, model that was put in for this area. And the fact that it's actually up on the agenda tonight has allowed me not to lie to my 3.5-year-old daughter tonight and tell her we are actually talking about playgrounds tonight. So, and I have showed her the pictures and she's all about it. So I have to support this, obviously, listening to my favourite ratepayer. I think the approach to this, there's a lot of good that has come through, and we have touched on some community consultation there, which obviously, as you might have gotten sick of me banging on about, is something that would be really great to be effective. And I think this particular model and this approach has been one of our more effective approaches, and I do sort of commend staff for that. I have talked before about the fundamentals, getting the fundamentals right. This is about providing that amenity, that expectation that ratepayers are looking for, and it is providing the young families another option. I have probably exhausted all the parks around the place. I'm not lucky enough as Councillor Koch to have a backyard to be able to play. So we do use those amenities that my rates go to, and we thank Council for the ability to do so. So yeah, really getting into the project, and we know that one is at the end of life, and we're taking full advantage and listening to the ratepayers on this one. So, and we're doing it in-house. So it is ticking a lot of boxes for me, and it's also getting a good feedback base already. So I think we're doing the right things about bringing the community along for the ride on this one. So yeah, I'm happy to support it.
Yeah, just to go through some of the information, I can category. I've got a 5-year-old grandson, my youngest one. I went to 6 parks in Gawler over the Christmas break because they get sick of one, you go to another. So I love the amenities, it's good. And where I am at Humphrey George Reserve is brilliant. So I think what we're doing is giving something back to our ratepayers, and I'm all for that. Any other discussion before I ask the mover to close? You wish to close the debate, Councillor Tooley?
Yeah, thanks everyone for their contribution. Just a couple of things in response and rebuttal. Don't forget, this becomes an asset for the town. You need reasons for why people want to come to your town. I think I mentioned to you when I was campaigning out at Springwood, the wetland area there, and I went to a number of people. Not one of them were from Gawler. They wouldn't take my flyer. They had brought their kids from another area. They were having their lunch there. They liked the amenity of it. This is a really good design. You can buy cheaper bog standard stuff, red plastic, green plastic, the stuff. It has its place in some parts, but this is more landscaped design. Hemmerford Grove is an untapped asset. I see a lot of people walking their dogs around that area. We have a dog pooper scooper dispenser thing there. A lot of people like to go into that area. It's at the back of Cochelle Estate, the very first boundary estate that we had. It's a wonderful asset, but it is underdeveloped. I agree with Councillor Sandball. So this will become an asset for the town. It'll be a go-to place for people to go to. That's the first big tick. Just answering Councillor Sandball's point about budget, my view, and I am disillusioned with budget processes, but my view is that we should claim the territory with the budget process. I don't agree that it should all be the administration plonking on the table, here's your budget plan. Now, if Councillor Sandball doesn't like the lift, and I accept your point about the grant, but you know, that's part of the budget process, you talk about that. But why don't we put in budget bids to say we want to activate Hammerford Grove Reserve? Doesn't mean this year. You've got a complete oval there. You could play international cricket on that. You could establish that as a real park and recreation area. Why not a budget bid that triggers that? Why don't we put a budget bid in to activate Goose Island? We as elected members should be driving the budget process, not the administration. This is our town. And we should be listening to our people, looking at what's needed, and we should be putting on the table things. They can be checked out for funding, they can be sequenced, we can get grants, but we need to do a lot more driving. I'd like to see this as the beginning of a real activation of Hammerford Grove Reserve and turn that into a real asset for the town. Because it's been levelled. I think that there's a sort of a homemade strip in the middle. You could imagine some nice change rooms or something. So a bit of future planning, we can get to that. But this is a great start and a great design. So I hope people will support it.
Thank you. Well, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Carry. Division. Councillor Tooley is called for division. All those in favour, please stand. All those in favour is Councillor Davies, Councillor Goldstone, Councillor Vallelonga, Councillor Tooley, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Shanks, Deputy Mayor Sandball, Councillor Fraser and Mayor Redmond. Those against is Councillor Kosh. The motion's carried. Thank you. No, there's no items listed for discussion. No items listed for discussion of future meeting. Any questions without notice? One, Councillor Davies.
How's the progress on the little bike things that in that motion about the bike week that from the youth committee? Do you know how that's going?
Which one? Councillor, Mr. Delena?
Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Sorry, just through the chair, are you referring to the bids, the youth committee bid for bike racks? Is that what
It's the council resolution for bike racks, yeah.
for,
It's not a budget bid, it was passed as something to happen by April.
I'll have to take that on notice, Councillor Davies. I'm aware of there's 4 bike racks, I think for $6,000 that to be installed. As it currently stands, they've been incorporated as within the budget bid for 21-22. I'll have to take that on notice and review the actual motion to see if we've actually got that process
because
right.
my understanding is that the actual theme week was coming up and they were requesting it in advance.
Take that on notice.
I'll take that on notice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Sandball.
Thank you, Chairman Paul. As we have the pleasure of Mr. Darson in the room tonight, I'm just wondering if I could ask a question about what was passionately brought up at the last council meeting about the feral cat problem, and whether or not there's been any action from the meeting regarding that, because of the people east of Cheek Avenue that have been complaining about the feral cat problem. I'm just wondering if it's possible to ask Mr. Darson as he's in the room.
Could you answer that?
If there's any update.
Oh, Mr. Viney will answer that.
Yeah. Through the chair. After that meeting, our team leader of community safety, Louise Dworski, contacted Mr. Bellchambers, and I know that there was a meeting on site and some assistance provided on how we can go about tackling the problem and hopefully getting a resolution to the nuisance that the cats cause.
Thank you. Could you turn your mic off, please? Any other questions without notice? Any motions without notice? I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you. Thanks, Henry. Yeah, that's good. Very good. Oh, well, that's my first one for the year.